opportunity, and thank you for coming, and thank you, Robert, to coming to make this presentation. And of course, you know, global warming is with us. There's no denying it. And the city, I just want to tell you briefly, before we hear the presentation from Robert, is that the city is doing our part too, because last year, the City Council has approved an ordinance to replace our city vehicles, all the fleets we have in the city, to environmental efficient and fuel efficiency vehicles whenever it needed. So right now, I can report to you, all 6 spirit buses that go around the city is in compressed natural gas, CNG. And also we open up a CNG station in the by Garvey Ranch Park, the city yard, and it's open for the public. It's only one of the 4 in the area. You have the CNG station. The closest one from Monterey Park is City of Commerce, of downtown LA, or Pasadena. So we are the 4th one. And also we have the first electric car in the city that's under the public works. The water department is used to read the water meters and for customer service. And so whenever that the city vehicles needs to be replaced, we will do it to the energy efficient and environmental friendly vehicles. And then very soon, or next year, we will have the first electric charging station in City Hall. It is in the planning, and it's also open for public. So more electric cars will be coming, and more energy efficient vehicles will be coming. And we are also looking at solar panels on top of the library, in the City Hall, in the library, in Langley Center, whatever we have, it is in the plans now. I just want to give you a little preview on what the city is doing. So those are very exciting things that we are doing our part. So thanks for coming to hear what's going on, the global warming, because it affects all of us. So let's do something about it before it's too late. It's our planet, it's the place we live. So without further ado, I don't want to take too much of the time from Robert. So please, I will have a presentation, a recognition to Robert Haw, the scientist, and talking about global warming. So please give a big hand for Robert. Thank you. And also one more thing is that, as you can see, we have a videotaping in here, and I just asked consent of Mr. Ha that it will be shown on the website, either in the library website or in the city website. So thank you, Robert, for allowing us to put it on the website so that more people will know about this presentation. So please give a big hand for Robert. Thank you.
I just wanted to share a little bit of information about Robert, our guest speaker. He's a physicist by training and a graduate of Stanford University. Robert has been employed at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory for 25 years as a navigation engineer on exploration missions across the solar system, from Mercury to Pluto. He's currently working on SMAP, an Earth-orbiting spacecraft designed to monitor global soil moisture levels. Robert founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Climate Change Symposium in 2008. In 2012, he co-founded the Pasadena Foothills chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby, an organization devoted to passing revenue-neutral carbon pricing legislation nationwide. He is also a climate reality presenter and has spoken frequently in the foothill communities about the urgency of addressing the climate crisis. So let's welcome one more time Robert Haw.
Can everybody hear me without the mic? Is that loud enough? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll probably just not use the mic because I kind of tend to want to walk around a little bit when I talk. Anyway, before I start, Mayor Chan, that's awesome. That's very impressive what the city is embarking on, these changes. And hear them well, everyone, because these are the kind of changes we are all going to have to make in the coming years. It doesn't have to be anything drastic, but these are going to have to be slow, incremental changes that we're all going to have to embark upon. So, thanks very much for coming today. As you've heard, I'm here to tell you why global warming is important to us. Let me go to, you already heard a little bit about my work on SMAP. So I'd spent my entire career working on distant planetary missions. And then it was maybe several years ago, I had an oh shoot moment about global warming. And so I left the Pluto project around 4 years ago and came to SMAP because I viewed this mission as much more critical. So here's an outline. Stopping global warming is vital because the wealth of our world depends on the health of our planet. So I'm going to start by showing why it's important to us, and then I'll talk about how to deal with it. Then, after that, I'll follow up and discuss about the science behind climate change, and then I'll show some examples of extreme weather events. So what causes global warming? Anybody? Does anybody give me an answer? Well, it's okay. Many people think it's Democrats. But in fact, it's carbon dioxide levels. Now, here's why I think it's important that we stop emitting carbon dioxide. Now, this is a 4-minute introduction with music accompaniment, and I hope you can hear this. This is the loudest we can get the sound. So despite all the scientific evidence, we're still blind to the fact that wealth in our world depends upon the health of our planet. Nature underpins everything we do. If we want to preserve this Garden of Eden we call Earth, we need to stop treating it like a subprime loan. This is happening off our coast right now. Sea lions are dying. Seabirds are starving. The crab fisheries have been shut down. Our impact now exceeds the safe operating limits of planet Earth. So this is a long-term response, but we need to do something right now. We can demand clean energy, but how do we make it happen everywhere? Does anybody have any suggestions? Because I can sure use any ideas. There are several ideas out there, but many of them are controversial. Subsidies are opposed because they're said to be inefficient. And some claim that it sets the government up to pick winners and losers. But so far, hands down, the winners are oil, gas, and coal subsidies. Maybe we should wait for people of goodwill to just save us. But that probably will fail because there's not many that are so altruistic. Even the trustees of Harvard, MIT, and Caltech refuse to divest from fossil fuels. And those are the universities that are doing the science telling us about climate change. So how can we end all this bickering and reach a consensus? Well, the first step seems very clear to me. Although it's not as if we can negotiate with Mother Nature on this one, hoping that she feels our pain. No, we have to stop emitting heat-trapping gases into the atmosphere. Most of the fossil fuels have to stay in the ground. Even this bastion of conservatism, the Bank of England, agrees. So that's what we have to do. We need a plan to keep fossil fuels in the ground, reduce carbon dioxide emissions as quickly as possible. So maybe we can agree on 4 simple criteria. The plan must encompass all carbon emitters, okay? It has to be inclusive. It has to get everybody on board. Nobody gets a free ride because we're all in this together. The plan must be effective. It must act fast. And probably most important of all, it must be fair. Because if it's not fair, this plan ain't going to last long. These people, unfortunately, seem unburdened with such concerns. I don't know if you've seen these kinds of rolling coal vehicles around, but they purposely emit copious amounts of pollution. Anyways, for those of us that are concerned, here's a list of basic plans that have been proposed. We can use either government regulations or marketplace incentives. If we use the marketplace, then there are 3 main ways to do that. Cap and trade, tax and spend, or fee and dividend. Here's an example of government regulation. This is the Clean Power Plan. The main advantage here is that it's already underway, at least legally. Its main disadvantages are that it's not inclusive, it doesn't get all the CO2 in the economy, and it's bureaucratic. meaning that it involves government laws and regulations, and it's more expensive to implement than it would otherwise have to be for what it's trying to achieve. Markets, though, need to be motivated. So let's apply incentives. So polluters pay and non-polluters are rewarded. Putting a price on carbon in the marketplace means making the market tell the truth regarding heat-trapping pollution. So here, this is how cap and trade works. It's a hybrid plan. This is California's cap and trade plan. It's a hybrid plan. It's part government regulation and part marketplace incentive. So the government sets a limit on emissions and then allocates emission permits authorizing those emissions. So it's like polluter permits, permits to pollute. Then the number of permits is decreased over time. That's what you see happening here. See this sort of stepping down? This is the cap. So this part here will be the CO2 that does not get emitted in the future if cap and trade continues on. By the way, up here, this is uncapped. These are CO2 emissions that are not even part of the plan yet. So the main advantages to cap and trade is that one, it does decrease the CO2 emissions. But number two, corporations can trade those permits because they assume value because they've been awarded for a certain set of actions. So they can trade them and profit from them. So many corporations love this sort of plan. The main disadvantages here are carbon dioxide leakage. It does reduce the CO2 number, but it doesn't get all the CO2 it's supposed to. So, some squeaks through. Another advantage is that it's not inclusive and it's also bureaucratic. It has high overhead because of setting these caps and then trying to enforce them. So, what about a carbon tax? Well, that frightens a lot of people. These Australians just want the past, the future to stay like the past. There are many advantages to a carbon tax. But unfortunately, whenever anyone hears that term, they immediately focus on its disadvantages, just like we saw on the previous slide. Also, this is the opposition in Australia to the Labour Party's carbon tax down there. And this is the kind of ads that they were flooding their media with at the time. So the bottom line is a carbon tax is inclusive, it is effective, and it does act fast. Economists overwhelmingly favor a carbon tax as the way to solve global warming. But it's not fair because it hurts the taxpayer and consumer. A revenue-neutral carbon fee, on the other hand, is a completely different creature from the carbon tax. It's as different as a horse is from a zebra. So the carbon fee has the same advantages as a carbon tax, but it turns the disadvantages of a carbon tax into advantages. So there are several ways it switches it around. It creates jobs instead of cutting down on jobs. It grows the economy instead of slowing the economy. And it does not place a burden on taxpayers. So that probably sounds too good to be true. But let me walk you through this quickly to explain it, because this is the way I think we have to go, because it's such a simple, fair plan. So here's a specific plan based on Strategy 3, and it's called Carbon Fee and Dividend. The federal government collects a pollution fee from all all the extraction companies, those are the companies upstream that are mining or pumping oil or coal or gas out of the ground. That's it. A few thousand companies are directly affected by this. Nobody else has anything to do, nothing else changes for anybody else, except that fee will probably be passed along to us in higher prices. But the fee starts low, so as not to cause hardship for anyone, and then it rises yearly at an accommodatable level. The point is that renewable energy is not assessed this fee because it doesn't emit heat-trapping gases. Now, what about that rise in prices? That's what the dividend compensates for. So the government, when it collects that money up at those upstream locations at the mine or the wellhead, it returns all revenue from the fee to American households. It doesn't keep a nickel. So you can call it a green check or a rebate or a dividend, but it comes with no strings attached. Everybody will get the same size check from the government. This kind of lump sum return is better for low and middle income families than any other plan. Now, reducing capital gains and corporate taxes is more efficient for the economy, but that benefits the top of society and it hurts the low-income households. And it's not just about us as individuals though either. A graduated fee on carbon sets a predictable market signal for investors. So it's a great business opportunity. It'll open up all sorts of new niches. So a few slides back, I showed that slide that had the little blue line going up. Well, that was the increase in the fee. This shows the increase in the monthly dividend. It starts off low, and then as the fee increases, so does the dividend. I mentioned that the higher costs will be passed on to us. So in the 10th year of this program, it will have increased the price of gasoline by $1 per gallon. After 10 years, we're seeing that kind of fluctuation now over 6 weeks. So the price of gas will have gone up $1, but in that 10th year, the rebate for a family of 4 will be $300 per month. So think about that. That's real money. And I mentioned that this plan grows the economy. Millions of new jobs. In the 10th year, there'll be 2 million new jobs created. So not only is it returning money to households, but it's generating new jobs in the economy. Lives will be saved each year due to improvements in air quality. 14,000 lives alone in the 10th year, more after that. These different colored bands are different census regions of the country. So some benefit more than others. The ones that benefit the most will be the ones with the dirtiest air right now. And then there will be a big drop in global warming pollution. A 52% reduction after 20 years. Here's the local impact in the very first year of a program like this. Costs for a family of 4 are estimated to go up around $250 to $300 a year. That's the sum of all these different items here. But that same family will get a rebate of $550. So that's a net benefit to them. And as I alluded to earlier, this program especially helps low energy users who are overwhelmingly lower income. So this is a financially progressive plan. Okay, so that's the idea behind this, but will it work? Here's a very successful implementation. In 2008, the province of British Columbia in Canada implemented a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Emissions have gone down, the economy is performing really well. It's working as advertised. The World Bank, the Economist magazine, many others laud this program. You might suggest, well, okay, that's a different country, that'll never work here. But in fact, something like this is already working in the US, and it's called the Alaska Permanent Fund. Alaskans every year get a rebate from the government based upon oil revenues in Alaska, and Alaskans love that check. So, this is a good news story. Carbon fee and dividend satisfies all those criteria that we wanted to satisfy. And working examples exist. So there are many ways to solve the carbon dioxide problem, but only carbon fee and dividend reduces emissions, grows the economy, and gives a fair shake to the average worker. Here it is again, graphically. You assess a fee up at the oil pump, that money gets paid to the US Treasury, it refunds 100% to US households. Fossil fuels become more expensive, but there's an alternative. Renewables will be cheaper because they're not assessed that fee. And the refund that comes will help people make this transition. So you can summarize carbon fee and dividend in 4 words. Here's your check. Christine Lagarde, the director of the International Monetary Fund, says now's the time for a carbon tax internationally. But instead of a tax, let's do a rebatable carbon fee. One that actually helps people through this transition instead of burdening them with more taxes. Okay, so that's been kind of a quick once through of carbon pricing plans. So we have a choice. Shall I continue on and discuss the science and some extreme weather events? Or do you want me just to stop for questions right now if anybody has questions and wait? Or would you rather wait until the very end and have questions? Shall I just move on? Just go ahead? Okay. All right, so let me discuss some of the science behind climate change. So there is a natural greenhouse effect around Earth. For millions of years, there's been a layer of carbon dioxide around the Earth that has left it in a clement environment, right? Something that's livable. If we didn't have any CO2 in the atmosphere, Earth right now would be a solid ball of ice and snow. All the oceans would be frozen. So it's kind of like the Goldilocks effect, okay? You don't want too little, you don't want too much. It was just right for human life and development. But now we're getting into the Papa bowl of porridge, okay? We've added almost 50% more carbon dioxide since the beginning of the industrial era. And almost all climate scientists agree that it's this additional CO2 that we've added that is responsible for climate change. So here's what that extra carbon dioxide has done to air temperatures in the last 130 years. Yellows and reds are hotter than the 1960s average, and blues are cooler. So here's the 60s. This is average air temperature around the world. So look at that. There's certainly a lot more yellows and reds now. And in fact, there's a disproportionate amount of red up here at the top of the planet. So it's warming much faster up there. And what else is also up in the northern areas? Why, there's a lot of snow and ice and permanently frozen soil. So that is melting even faster up there than maybe other ice in the central area of the planet. And so that's contributing to sea level rise. So those higher temperatures are caused by all the extra heat that's trapped in the Earth system. Okay? This much heat every day. 400,000 Hiroshima-style atomic bombs going off. So Earth is a big planet, but that is a lot of energy. Maybe you've asked, if the Earth is warming, why don't I feel hotter? The reason is because 95% of the heat is being captured by oceans and ice. If you were a fish, you wouldn't ask that question. Only 2% of the heat is warming the air. Water can do that. The oceans are doing that because water has a high heat capacity. It means it just absorbs a lot more heat. Because, it takes a lot of heat to boil a pot of water, but hardly any heat at all to boil a pot of air. So here's a visible manifestation of that heating. So El Nino, 2 El Ninos, the one back almost 20 years ago, and the one that's coming this year. Both of these in Octobers. Okay, you can see in the one in the 97, the white and the red are the real hot areas of the ocean. You can see that this was a very large area of warming, but there was some cool water right next door. And look up here around Hawaii. It was pretty much normal kind of water temperatures around Hawaii back in this El Nino. But now, the El Nino that's in place this year, look at this. Twice as many. There's 2 tongues of hot water across the Pacific. There's no blue tongue coming across to the eastern side. And around Hawaii, the waters are much, much warmer this time. This is a map from the Orbiting Carbon Observatory that is mapping carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere at a high resolution. Okay, so now we're mapping CO2 from both space and from the ground where we're taking measurements. So this shows how carbon dioxide is dynamically changing month by month and day by day. And this shows a soil moisture map from SMAP. The blues are dry soil, the reds are very moist soil, and the other colors are intermediate between those 2 extremes. SMAP produces a global map of soil moisture like this every 3 days. So we'll get a good idea on very quick turnaround on what is happening with soil moisture over the years. Now this shows a distribution of summertime temperatures in the northern hemisphere. You might say this is back in the good old days. This is in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So all that's happened here is all those weather stations, the temperatures have been collected. This is just data, right? There's no prediction here. And then they've been divided, just binned in 3 different categories. So cooler than average, average, warmer than average in those over this time span. Now watch what happens as we go forward in time. Here's the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. Do you see how far this has shifted to the right relative to this baseline? Okay, they didn't change those divisions between the blue and the white and the white and the red. Those temperatures are still the same. But there are still cold temperatures happening in locations, but not nearly as many as formerly happened. A lot more warm temperatures. And what else has happened? There's all kind of like the emergence of a 4th category, that of extreme heat, which we never saw before. So the same heat that is evaporating water out of the oceans also dries out the land. Okay, and the point being, because we have a warmer atmosphere, it's like a bigger sponge for water vapor. So the land can be dried out for longer periods of time now because there's more room up there in the air to hold the water vapor. And so this is what we're seeing now. We're seeing longer droughts. And we're certainly seeing that in California, and we saw it in the Midwest a few years ago. But what goes up has to come down. So eventually, there's just a bigger collection of water vapor up in the sky, and eventually it has to come thundering down. And so we're seeing an increase in the number of heavy downpours now. This is how climate change is accelerating the water cycle. So remember, only 1 degree separates this from this. Here's a video showing melting ice on Greenland. This is a time series between 2004 and 2014. Pinks and reds indicate ice that's melting and just running off into the ocean. This line shows the decrease in mass of all that ice on Greenland. So it's gradually losing mass. So that's as of last year. Incredible. If this entire ice mass is to melt or to crumble and to fall off into the ocean, it would raise sea levels around the planet by around 20 meters. That's around, 20 feet. And this is the Arctic ice cap. In the last 35 years, the area of the Arctic ice cap has shrunk by a half. Its thickness has decreased by a half. So a half times a half is a quarter. 25%. There's only 25% as much ice up here now as there was back in 1980. Okay, losing the ice cap is important because before, in the summer, it would reflect most of the sunlight coming in there. Remember, in the sun, it's really tipped towards the sun. A lot of sun is coming down there, but it would get reflected. Now, with that ice cap being melted, it's being absorbed in here, and it's helping heat the planet even faster. And there's evidence to suggest that because this is heating and warming up, the jet stream location is changing. And that's contributing to some of the polar vortices we've heard about. So the bottom line here is that Arctic sea ice is melting even faster than predicted. And sea level is rising faster than predicted. Now this is a truly hideous looking graph. But since we're talking about climate science, I do want to point this out. Air bubbles trapped in old ice can track global temperature change over time. Now today is over here on the left. So this is 150,000 years ago and time goes this way. But look here, this is an anomaly compared to all of this previous time. Think of the bitterest cold winters you've ever heard of or experienced, and the most extremely hot summer temperatures, the longest droughts, that's all embedded in that little knot up there. What we're seeing, this is called the Holocene, the last 10,000 years. I mean, our civilization, world civilization, is only half of that. But before that, this was the way the climate and weather worked on Earth. There was just vast swings, chaotic changes, huge swings back and forth. And it goes much further than that also. So this is what the danger is triggering a change to go back into this kind of a cycle. It was only because we got into this stable regime here, by luck, no one knows how that happened, that farming is possible, because farmers could regularly expect conditions that were conducive for planting and then for harvesting. Now this graph kind of goes back in the other direction, sorry for the reversal, from this way to this way. This is looking at the last 10,000 years, just that tight little knot, and this shows the global average air temperature, and indeed it did not fluctuate very much. So here the scale is in degrees Fahrenheit, fairly stable, just a maximum of 1.5 degree change until we got to the beginning of the industrial era, and the temperature has begun to shoot up. This red is the predicted increase in air temperature over the next 70 to 80 years if we continue burning oil, coal, and gas for most of our energy. Just for comparison, a 5-degree change going in the other direction led to a mile-thick sheet of ice over New York State. So just think of that kind of flip in reverse if we heat the planet by even more. And you may have heard about 98% of climate scientists in agreement that man is mostly responsible for the Earth's warming. That's so. But what's not so widely reported is that when it comes to published papers, 99.99% are in total agreement. And there's only one that does not agree that man is causing this warming. Okay, so that's my kind of quick science backgrounder. What I'm going to show now is just a tiny subset of recent record-setting extreme weather events. It represents only the tip of the iceberg of what's in store if we don't come together as a nation on a climate solution soon. So these magazine covers remind us that global warming is something we need to pay attention to.
One of the things we've seen is that the average humidity of our planet has increased by 4%. Warmer air is more popular. And so on average,
Hard to hear, I guess, is it? Shoot. Okay, well, she's saying that warmer atmospheres create more heavier downpours. Okay. So this is exactly what Dr. Haw is talking about. Too much rain to the built-up infrastructure. And here. So out near Desert Center on the I-10 last summer, and then the year before, east of Las Vegas. These scenes are examples of what we can expect to see a lot more of in the future if we continue burning fossil fuels. A deluge of a different kind. This happens when the outside temperature is less than 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Islanders are losing their homelands. In this country, rising seas and storm surges will lead to real estate losses and habitat destruction. In Miami, rising seas are causing storm sewers to reverse direction during high tide, flooding the city even when there's no rain. That's why it's called clear day flooding. If you put your finger into that water and dared to taste it, it would be salty. And temperatures are going up. This was around the start of our drought. You may remember the station fire. I sure do, because this is JPL. And the Rim Fire was the Sierra Nevada's largest fire since records began. January fires are very rare in California, even in Southern California. And the North Fire brought the I-15 to a standstill last summer. Unprecedented. Valley Fire was one of the many wildfires in California this year. In India, it got so hot, the road melted. This is supposed to be white crosswalk. Yeah. But not to be outdone, it's also happening here in the US. In July of 2012, the heat was so extreme in Washington, D.C. that the runways at the airport melted. I don't know if you can see it up here, but the tires here are sinking in to the asphalt. They're making a little bowl, and the planes can't take off. So everybody had to disembark and go and find some other way to get to their destination. You've probably heard of the Cross-Alaska Dog Sled Race held each winter. Does this look like winter in Alaska? Governor Brown's April 1st press conference in a Sierra Nevada meadow. There should have been 5 feet of snow there at that time. So who's going to be the climate change fool? This is one of the main reservoirs for the State Water Project, which distributes water to Southern California. This is the I-5 right here. If you go up the I-5, you drive across that bridge. This reservoir has never been so low since it was constructed. At the end of 2012's summer, more than half the country was in drought. So droughts will start lasting longer and appearing in places unaccustomed to water shortages. This is the Rio Grande 2 years ago. Taiwan. And Hunan province in China. But this is just one example. China has been getting hammered with extreme weather events the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Argentina, at least 50 died in this particular extreme flood. Major flooding in India in 2012 and then again in 2013. Remarkable flooding along the Danube in Germany in 2013, and it was the second time they had catastrophic flooding like this in a decade. England, unrelenting gales 2 winters in a row led to massive flooding throughout the country. Unprecedented rains in Indonesia. Too much rain caused a hillside to collapse in Washington State. It buried 49 homes, leaving 43 dead. After all those droughts the drought in Texas from a few years, Texas has been getting all kinds of floods. Here's one back in May. And then there was a torrential downpour like never seen before in the French Riviera last month. 19 died. This was the same day as the South Carolina flooding. First the I-10, then the I-15, now the I-5. Pounding rains and mudslides shut it down near the Grapevine. And a 1,000-year flood event in Death Valley last month. That means it should only occur once every 1,000 years. But we're seeing these things happen fairly regularly now. As we've seen, heat is intensifying Earth's water cycle. So this graph shows that extreme weather events are increasing. They really are. So what you see here is year on the bottom, and then this is the number of events that are happening in any given year. And so the trend of floods and storms and fires is upward. So there's more occurring in recent times. This only goes out to 2011, and I have to update this because there's been a big uptick in extreme weather disasters since 2011. So individually, people have difficulty grasping a concept as overwhelming as climate change because it's masked by weather fluctuations. So we need to use science to explain our changing world. It's the only tool we have that's up to the job. And then when we understand what's going on, we need to take action. So here are some downsides of ignoring climate change. So just one example of many, in 2010 there was a drought in Russia and Ukraine and Kazakhstan. They didn't get nearly the grain crop they normally get, so they had no surplus to export abroad. Food prices worldwide rose as a result. And in 2012, because of the Midwest drought, food costs in the US went up. So this cold weather came about because of a change in the jet stream. And as I mentioned, that's been linked to a warming Arctic. So a stable climate and dirty energy have brought us breathtaking opportunities and prosperity over the last 1,500 years. But now we're destroying Earth's ability to feed us. We're killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. And then there's the toll on society itself. Climate change is a contributing factor to the unrest in Syria. And I might mention that unrest is now being exported to the rest of the planet. Many farmers can no longer make a living from the soil there, so they moved to the cities in Syria. But they weren't welcome there, and so they moved on, and now they're heading into Europe. And then there are thresholds we really don't want to cross. Okay, this hole suddenly appeared in northern Siberia last summer. No one is quite sure how it got there. Okay, it's not a meteorite crater. It's not a normal kind of cave. It's not a sinkhole. The best explanation appears to be that it was an eruption of methane from melting permafrost just beneath the surface. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's 86 times stronger than carbon dioxide. Okay, so the threat here is that we could have thousands, no, tens of thousands of these belches erupting all around the northern latitudes in the coming years as air temperatures warm and it melts the permafrost more quickly. And then, instead of having 80 years to adjust to an 8-degree Fahrenheit rise globally, we'll only have 80 months. The mayor of Lancaster is pushing his city to become the solar capital of the planet. And when asked by a reporter if he thought climate change was a threat, the mayor responded, "Absolutely. I may be a Republican, but I'm no idiot." The Dalai Lama is even more direct in his comments. Think of it this way. Do you want to get clobbered in the head with a beach ball or a baseball? Putting a price on carbon will immediately start a cascade of beneficial changes. We have the technology. All we're lacking is the political will. So here's what you can do. You can vote, by all means. Use your power to vote, your right to vote. Make choices that reduce oil and gas use in your everyday lives. Divest from fossil fuels. Of course, your divestment is not going to bankrupt the fossil fuel companies, but it sends a signal if people en masse do this. It shows, it removes the social license of those companies to continue polluting our global common atmosphere. And you can support carbon pricing. So where do we go from here?
What is that carbon pricing?
Just, I'll show that. Hang on, right now. So, where do we go from here? Call or email your member of Congress and ask them to support a rising price on carbon. It's the only sensible step forward at this point. Now, to answer your question, here. This is my last slide, and I have a summary of these different pricing options. So, thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Okay, so